Hi, my name's Emma and I do crime videos, crime in the city on YouTube. Um, I decided that I wanted to tell a story of something that really affects our family, and that's autism. Autism's a huge part of our life, and I really want to do this video for new parents to put their mind at rest, but also to try and understand that they've got a big fight coming up. So I'm going to start at the beginning. In the year 2000, John and I had been married for 5 years. We owned our own house, we had full-time jobs, and we had Noah. The whole family was really excited to have Noah. He was the fifth generation in the family, and it was a really exciting time. Everyone fussed over him. Um, yeah, and it was a really, really good time. After a few months, I started suffering from postnatal depression. Um, this was hard, and then I got pregnant again. So I hadn't had time to get over the first bout of postnatal depression. Reuben came along and I was suffering really bad. I had to go in and out of hospital and I slept all the time. During this time, I passed my driving test. I started going privately for mental health, which we couldn't afford, but it was the only way I could get help. And I started to go to mums and toddler groups. Now, mums and toddler group was really helpful for me because it got me out of the house. It broke my day up. I had two little kids who I was struggling with, just passed my driving test, so I had more freedom. And see, there's good and bad things about mums and toddler groups. Sometimes there's a lot of bitching, which is just silly because that's not why we're there. We're there for the kids. Mentally, it helped me because it gave me conversation with adults. But the other thing it did for me is I compared my kids to other kids. Now, I think a lot of parents do that. They look at their milestones and think, well, my child's not doing that. There must be something wrong. So I tried not to compare too much, but I started to realise that Noah wasn't developing like the other kids were developing. So I went to the doctors. And of course, the doctor said, well, you're suffering from postnatal depression. I'm sure it'll be fine. He's okay. They didn't even look at Noah. Then I went again and I took my husband with me and they listened a little more and they said, it's probably nothing, but we can put you down for CAMS, which is, children's, like psychologists, psychiatrists for children. We'll put you on the list. I was told the list was 18 months long. So, okay, he was on the list. I started to realise when he went to nursery, it was becoming more and more obvious. There was no eye contact. He was just stuck in his own little world. And I was desperate. And I remember finally getting to a child psychologist and she said to me, knowing that I had postnatal depression and it became with psychosis, I was really sick and I was on a lot of medication, but I still knew. Because as a mum, and fathers as well, you know your child better than anyone. I might not have known the diagnosis at that point, but I knew there was something wrong. And I was right. And I remember seeing a psychologist and she said to me, not interested in Noah, more interested in me and my behaviour. And she said to me, Emma, Noah isn't autistic. He never will be. Don't push against the system. You will not win. Those exact words. And God, did that give me strength? Did that make me fight? A lot of people would have just said, she's a doctor. She knows better than me. And I'm sorry she didn't know better than me. I knew my child and I knew there was something wrong. And that gave me fight. I went home and I contacted the National Autistic Society over and over again, and they tried to get me a private doctor. Now, we didn't have this money. It was on credit cards. It was lending off my mum. We just, we didn't have loads of money. But unfortunately, and I've seen it time and time again, if you pay, doctors listen. They listen more than they speak. If they listen more than they speak, they learn more about the patient. And I understand they're under a lot of strain in the NHS. I understand that. And it's still like this today, 20 years later. 6 months later, that's how long it took. Noah was 4 at this point. I got a doctor from Sheffield. She came to my house. I paid her £100 cash. She was a real doctor. She sat with me on the sofa, and she had a little cry with me. And she listened, and she asked questions, and I asked questions, and she looked at Noah. He was on the rug and he was lining all his cards up. She looked in his bedroom and could see all the teddies in size order, no room for him. Everything was in its own meticulous place. And she said, I believe you. I believe he's autistic. And that was one of the best days of my life. I wasn't happy because my child was autistic. I was happy because I thought, we have a label, and with that label we'll get help. Little did I know that was the beginning of the fight. So this doctor wrote to my health authority and said, this woman is desperate. She needs help. Her child is very obviously not developing neurotypically. Another 6 months later, we got an assessment with the NHS. We didn't have to pay. We got visits from an amazing doctor. Because a lot of doctors on the NHS are amazing. They just don't have the time, which is really sad. We finally got an assessment. It took 45 minutes. They'd assessed him at nursery, at mums and toddlers, at home, at families' houses. And they said, yeah, he's autistic. He's diagnosed. He has Asperger's syndrome. And we were sent home with a few leaflets. And I was excited. Not because he was autistic, just because I thought he's finally going to get help at school. People are going to understand. It wasn't the label I needed, it was the help and understanding that we got with that label. We went home. And it was, what next? We ended up moving to another town. Just the next town. We wanted to get him into a particular school. This was one of the biggest fights. We got him into the school, but we believed that he needed a teaching assistant 100% of the time. So at that point, you could get a statement. And I was told by the local authority, he doesn't need a statement. Now, when you know your child's autistic, Jesus, do you research and do you read? And you're Googling every 5 minutes, you're speaking to doctors, you're speaking to other parents online. Because knowledge is power. And with autism, that's definitely the case. So I was told I couldn't have a statement, and I told them I was having a statement. Now, when you want something from the local authority, they weigh things up. A statement gives you, it gives you a lot more legal rights within the school. It's section 3B, to remember that. And it tells you basically what that child needs, and the local authority has to meet those needs. It might not be in the school you chose, but the school we chose said that they could meet his needs. So eventually I got a statement. That was about 6 months later. They gave the school funding, and Noah got a teaching assistant 100% of the time. And that was so comforting. He started to talk more. He started to interact more. He wouldn't play with his brother or with me and John, but he would play next to them. He was starting to kind of make friends. I mean, at 4 and 5 years old, are they really friends? I don't know. But he was invited to birthday parties, which was something I was always worried about. I didn't want him to be left out. Although in later life that did happen. I want parents to know that It's hard. It's a bloody fight. But if you know there's something wrong, it may not be autism, but if you know there's something wrong, then you have got to stick at it. Don't accept the fact that a doctor says no because they've seen you for 2 minutes in a doctor's office. Don't accept that. You've got to keep going. Don't be aggressive, because as soon as you start screaming, shouting, crying, swearing, they stop listening. You have to be calm, you have to be professional, and you have to stick to your guns. If you want an EHCP, an educational healthcare plan, which replace the old statements, then you do that. You get it and you go for it, because they're so important. They say they're not because they cost a lot of money, but they are, and they give that child a lot of legal rights. It's hard, especially for some husbands sometimes, or even some parents or family members. There was only, I think, my auntie and my mum who actually believed that Noah was autistic. So everyone else is making out that I'm going crazy. Not one of them apologised. Not one of them said sorry. That frustration when you know there's something wrong with your child, but everyone's saying, Emma, you're just ill, you're poorly, you're wrong, killed me. Because I knew I was right, and I felt like I was going insane. And I wasn't, and I was right, and I needed desperately help for my child. Even my husband at that time, he was supporting me, but I don't think he fully believed it. When you accept the label, when you accept that your child has autism. So I took a break then. One thing for me that's really important is acceptance. I knew Noah was autistic, but my husband, I think he came to terms with it a little slower than I did. But the thing is, when you have that diagnosis is not easy to get. And if you've got it, the chances are it's pretty much 100%, because it takes a long time to get to these assessments. But something that's really important is, once you accept autism and don't fight against it, things get easier. I've spoke to a lot of parents and a lot of couples that I've helped. And in a few instances, the father, not demonising fathers, but the father has dismissed it. That's not helpful. Your child is only able to behave the way they do. They can't behave any differently. As soon as you accept it, you work with it and not against it, and life gets easier. It doesn't matter why they do the things they do. They just do. And they look at the world differently to us, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's different, not less. It's just different. And what's wrong with that? So as soon as you accept the condition, life gets easier. It really does. So when Noah was as settled as he possibly could be in school, it was time for Reuben to start going to school. Now, Reuben developed differently to Noah. He was very rough and tumble, always being cheeky, always being funny, always just being a lad, a little boy. So it took a little longer to realise that Reuben was autistic too. And I think for myself, I was denying it for a long time because I compared him to Noah, which I shouldn't have done. But the longer it went on, the more I learned about autism. Developmental disorders, and it's a spectrum. Noah is at high school age, but he's 20 years old. He's a man with a beard, but inside he's a little boy. Whereas Reuben is, I hate this, I don't get this diagnosis, high functioning atypical. So he's very different. So whilst Reuben was at school, he was getting into trouble a lot. He couldn't listen, he couldn't concentrate. And I went to the SENCO, Special Educational Needs Coordinator, and I said, I think there's something wrong. Of course, they dismiss it. They always do in the beginning. But I think because I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and Noah was autistic, they started to finally listen. So our story goes on and on and on. Obviously, there's a lot of details I've left out, a lot of things that have happened, tribunals, legal issues. But I think for now I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening.